Can you please tell Maria that we need dinner served earlier tonight? Catherine Whitmore said to the black woman sitting quietly at the children's table, helping her 8-year-old with homework. We're entertaining important guests from Harvard. She had no idea she was talking to Dr. Amelia Thompson, Harvard's youngest tenured professor in cognitive psychology and one of the most respected minds in her field. Before we begin this beautiful story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now, let's get back to our story. Amelia looked up from the advanced mathematics worksheet she was reviewing with Emma Whitmore, her expression remaining perfectly composed despite the casual dismissal she had just received. At 34, Dr. Amelia Thompson had learned to navigate these moments with a grace that came from years of being underestimated in academic circles, though it never stopped stinging when it happened in a home where she spent 12 hours a day caring for children she genuinely loved. Of course, Mrs. Whitmore, Amelia replied in her soft, measured voice. I'll speak with Maria right away. Catherine barely acknowledged the response, already turning her attention back to the elaborate place settings her housekeeper was arranging for the evening's dinner party. The Whitmores were hosting Dr. Harrison Mitchell, Harvard's Dean of Educational Psychology, along with several other prominent academics, to discuss a major donation to the university. And Amelia, Catherine added without looking back, please make sure the children are bathed and in bed before our guests arrive. We can't have them running around making noise while we're discussing serious academic matters. Yes, ma'am. What Catherine Whitmore didn't know, as she busied herself with crystal stemware and imported linens, was that her children's nanny held 2 doctoral degrees from MIT, had published 43 peer-reviewed papers in cognitive psychology, and was currently on sabbatical from Harvard while she worked on groundbreaking research about accelerated learning in gifted children. Emma Whitmore, however, was beginning to suspect that her nanny was far more than she appeared to be. Miss Amelia, the 8-year-old whispered as her mother disappeared into the kitchen. How come you know so much about everything? You helped me with my science project on quantum physics. You speak French better than my tutor, and you just solved this calculus problem like it was addition. Amelia smiled gently at the precocious child who had become her favorite part of this unusual arrangement. I've always enjoyed learning, sweetheart. Knowledge is something that belongs to everyone, regardless of what job they do. But my mom says that people like you don't usually know about things like quantum physics. Amelia felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever she was reminded of how the Whitmore family viewed her. What kind of people does your mom think I am, Emma? Emma fidgeted with her pencil, clearly uncomfortable. She says that you're not educated like us, that you're here to learn from our family, not the other way around. The irony was so profound that Amelia almost laughed. She was indeed here to learn, but not in the way Catherine Whitmore imagined. Amelia was conducting covert research on how gifted children developed in affluent environments, studying the impact of privilege and expectation on cognitive growth. The Whitmore position had been perfect for her research. She could observe the children's learning patterns up close while remaining invisible to the adults who made assumptions about her capabilities based on her role and race. Well, Amelia said carefully, sometimes people surprise you with what they know. The important thing is to keep an open mind about everyone you meet. 2 hours later, the Whitmore house was transformed into an elegant showcase of wealth and sophistication. Dr. Harrison Mitchell arrived precisely at 7, accompanied by Dr. Patricia Chen, the renowned child psychologist, and Dr. Robert Williams, whose research on educational inequality had shaped policy at the federal level. Catherine Whitmore greeted her guests with the polished charm of someone accustomed to entertaining the intellectual elite, though Amelia noticed from the kitchen doorway that Catherine's knowledge of their actual work was superficial at best. She overheard Catherine referring to Dr. Chen's groundbreaking study on cultural bias in intelligence testing as that Asian thing about test scores. Richard and I are so passionate about educational excellence, Catherine was saying as she led the group toward the dining room. We believe that quality education should be available to those who can truly appreciate it. Dr. Mitchell nodded politely, though Amelia caught the slight frown that crossed his face at Catherine's phrasing. As the evening progressed, Amelia moved quietly through the house, checking on the children and ensuring that the household ran smoothly, while the adults discussed million-dollar donations and academic policies. She could hear fragments of their conversation, debates about cognitive development, discussions of educational methodology, arguments about the role of socioeconomic factors in academic achievement. It was torture. These were her colleagues, her peers in the academic world, sitting 20 feet away discussing research she had contributed to, while she remained invisible in her role as the help. Dr. Chen was actually citing one of Amelia's papers during her discussion of gifted education, though she had no idea the author was serving coffee in the next room. The most fascinating recent work, Dr. Chen was saying, comes from Dr. A.M. Thompson at Harvard. Her research on accelerated cognitive development in gifted children is absolutely revolutionary. She's demonstrated that environmental factors play a much larger role than we previously understood. Richard Whitmore leaned forward with interest. Thompson? I don't think I know that name. She's quite private, Dr. Mitchell explained. Brilliant woman, but she shuns publicity. Her work speaks for itself, though. She's probably the most important cognitive psychologist of her generation. Catherine laughed dismissively. Well, she can't be that important if we haven't heard of her. I mean, we would certainly know about any significant Harvard faculty, wouldn't we? Amelia paused in the hallway, holding a tray of empty glasses, as she listened to her own work being discussed by people who had no idea she was within earshot. Actually, Dr. Williams interjected, Dr. Thompson is notoriously reclusive. She rarely attends conferences or social functions. Some people call her the ghost of Harvard because her research is everywhere, but she herself is nearly impossible to find. How mysterious, Catherine said with obvious skepticism. Sounds like academic mythology to me. That was when 8-year-old Emma Whitmore came running down the stairs in her pajamas, directly violating her mother's instructions about staying in her room during the dinner party. Mommy, Emma called out excitedly. I finished the math problems Miss Amelia gave me, and she said I could show you. Catherine's face flushed with embarrassment as her daughter burst into the elegant dining room, clutching a worksheet covered in complex equations. Emma, what did I tell you about coming downstairs? Catherine snapped, but Emma was already approaching the table where the academics sat. Look, Emma said proudly, showing her worksheet to Dr. Mitchell. Miss Amelia taught me how to solve differential equations. She says I'm ready for calculus. Dr. Mitchell examined the worksheet with growing amazement. The work was not only correct, it was elegant in its approach and showed a level of mathematical understanding that was extraordinary for an 8-year-old. This is remarkable, he said slowly. Who exactly is Miss Amelia? Catherine forced a laugh that sounded more like a bark. She's just our nanny. Emma has quite an imagination. I'm sure she copied this from somewhere. Copied? Dr. Chen leaned over to look at the worksheet. These aren't textbook problems. This is original mathematical thinking. The methodology here is, this is graduate-level pedagogical approach. Emma beamed proudly. Miss Amelia says that math is just another language, and once you understand the grammar, you can have conversations with numbers. She's teaching me about quantum mechanics next week. The three academics exchanged glances that Catherine couldn't interpret, but that made her increasingly uncomfortable. Where exactly did your nanny learn to teach advanced mathematics? Dr. Williams asked carefully. Oh, I'm sure she picked up bits and pieces over the years, Catherine said dismissively. You know how it is with people in her position. They absorb things. Dr. Mitchell set down his wine glass. Mrs. Whitmore, would it be possible to meet this Miss Amelia? I'd like to understand how she's approaching gifted education with Emma. Catherine's discomfort was now visible to everyone in the room. I don't think that's necessary. She's just following some basic curriculum I gave her. Mom, Emma interrupted, you didn't give Miss Amelia any curriculum. She made her own. She says that every child's brain is different, so every child needs a different map for learning. The silence that followed was pregnant with implications that Catherine was only beginning to grasp. A different map for learning, Dr. Chen repeated slowly. That's a very sophisticated way of thinking about individualized education. It's also, Dr. Williams added quietly, almost exactly how Dr. A.M. Thompson describes her methodology in her latest paper. Catherine felt the ground shifting beneath her. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. Emma, oblivious to the tension she was creating, continued chattering happily. Miss Amelia has lots of books in her room about brain stuff and learning. She let me read one about how kids' minds work. It had her name written inside the front cover. Dr. Mitchell leaned forward with sharp interest. Her name was in the book. Uh-huh, it said A. Thompson in really fancy writing. The three academics stared at each other, then at Catherine, then back at Emma. Emma, Dr. Chen said gently, what does Miss Amelia look like? She's really pretty. She has dark skin, and she always wears her hair in a bun when she's working. She's super smart, and she knows everything about everything. Dr. Mitchell stood up abruptly. Mrs. Whitmore, I need to meet your nanny, now. Catherine's protests were cut short when Amelia herself appeared in the doorway, having heard enough of the conversation to understand that her cover was about to be blown anyway. Good evening, she said calmly, stepping into the dining room with the same quiet dignity she had maintained for the past 6 months. Dr. Mitchell's face went through a remarkable transformation as recognition dawned. Dr. Amelia Thompson. Hello, Harrison, Amelia replied with a slight smile. The silence that followed was absolute. Catherine Whitmore looked like she had been struck by lightning. Dr. Chen and Dr. Williams were staring at Amelia as if she had materialized from thin air. Catherine stammered. You're the doctor, Thompson they were talking about? I am. But you're our nanny. Yes, I'm also a tenured professor at Harvard, a cognitive psychologist, and the author of 37 books on child development and educational theory. The two are not mutually exclusive. Dr. Mitchell found his voice first. Amelia, what the hell are you doing working as a nanny? Amelia looked around the room, taking in the shocked faces of the academic elite and the growing horror on Catherine's face as the magnitude of her misconceptions became clear. I'm conducting research, Amelia explained calmly. I wanted to study how gifted children develop in privileged environments, and I needed to observe their learning patterns in a natural setting. The Whitmore position provided perfect access while allowing me to remain essentially invisible to the adults who might otherwise influence the children's behavior. Invisible, Catherine repeated weakly. Yes, it's remarkable how much you can learn about people when they think you're not worth noticing. When they assume your intelligence based on your job title or your race, they reveal things about themselves they might otherwise keep hidden. Dr. Williams leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant methodology. Thank you. The preliminary results have been quite illuminating. Catherine found her voice, though it came out as more of a squeak. You've been studying us? I've been studying your children's learning environment, yes. Emma and her brother are remarkably gifted, but their development is being shaped by some interesting socio-cultural factors that I wanted to observe firsthand. What kind of factors? Dr. Chen asked with professional interest. Amelia considered her answer carefully. The impact of assumed intellectual superiority on actual learning outcomes, the effect of economic privilege on educational expectations, the way that children internalize their parents' biases about intelligence and capability. She paused, looking directly at Catherine. And the fascinating phenomenon of how adults can live in close proximity to expertise while remaining completely oblivious to it, because it doesn't come in the package they expect. Richard Whitmore, who had been silent throughout this revelation, finally spoke up. How long have you been planning this? The research design took about 2 years to develop. I've been in your home for 6 months, gathering data while also genuinely caring for your children and helping them reach their academic potential. Emma, who had been listening to this conversation with growing excitement, suddenly clapped her hands together. You're famous! My nanny is famous! Amelia smiled at the child who had become genuinely dear to her. I'm a researcher, sweetheart. The work is more important than being famous. Catherine's shock was beginning to transform into anger. "You lied to us. You deceived us for months. I told you I had extensive experience in child development. I told you I had studied advanced mathematics and psychology. I told you I was qualified to help your children with their education. Everything I said was true. But you didn't tell us you were a Harvard professor. You didn't ask. You saw a black woman applying for a nanny position and made assumptions about my background, my education, and my capabilities. I never lied about who I was. You simply never bothered to really see me." Dr. Mitchell shook his head in amazement. "The academic world has been looking for you for months. You disappeared from Harvard with no explanation, stopped attending conferences, stopped responding to colleagues. We thought something had happened to you. I took a sabbatical to conduct field research. I needed to step outside the ivory tower to understand how our theories play out in the real world." "And what have you learned?" Dr. Williams asked. Amelia looked around the elegant dining room, at the expensive artwork and crystal chandeliers, at the family who had employed her for months while consistently treating her as intellectually inferior. "I've learned that intelligence is often invisible to people who aren't looking for it in the right places. I've learned that brilliant children can flourish even in environments where the adults around them have limited understanding of how learning actually works. And I've learned that some of the most profound education happens when people are forced to confront their own assumptions about who deserves respect and recognition." Catherine was still processing the enormity of what she had just discovered. "All this time, we've been treating you like someone whose intelligence didn't matter because of my job title and my race," Amelia finished gently. "Yes." "Oh my God," Catherine whispered, the full weight of her behavior over the past 6 months crashing down on her. "The things we said, the way we treated you, have been incredibly valuable for my research," Amelia said. "Thank you for being so authentic in your interactions with me. It's provided exactly the kind of data I needed." Dr. Chen laughed despite the tension in the room. "Only you would turn being subjected to systematic disrespect into a research opportunity. Everything is a learning experience if you approach it with the right mindset." Emma tugged on Amelia's sleeve. "Miss Amelia, does this mean you're not going to be our nanny anymore?" Amelia knelt down to Emma's level. "My research project is complete, sweetheart. But that doesn't mean I care about you any less. You and your brother are exceptional children, and I've loved watching you learn and grow. Will you still help me with my math?" "Always. Learning doesn't stop just because circumstances change." Richard cleared his throat. "Dr. Thompson, I feel like we owe you an enormous apology." "You owe your children an apology," Amelia corrected. "They've been watching how you treat people you consider beneath you. They've been learning from your example about who deserves respect and who doesn't. That's going to shape how they see the world for the rest of their lives." The room fell silent as the implications of that statement sank in. Dr. Mitchell stood up. "Amelia, I need to know. Are you planning to return to Harvard?" "Eventually. But first, I'm going to finish writing about what I've learned here. This research could change how we think about educational environments and the role of unconscious bias in child development." Catherine found her voice again. Will you write about us?" "I'll write about the patterns I observed. The data will be anonymized, of course, but yes, the academic world needs to understand how these dynamics play out in real homes with real families. What will you say about us?" Amelia considered this carefully. "I'll say that you love your children and want the best for them. I'll also say that your assumptions about intelligence and capability based on race and social class created an environment where extraordinary expertise was invisible to you for months. And I'll suggest that this phenomenon is far more common than most people realize." Dr. Williams nodded approvingly. "It sounds like groundbreaking work." "I hope so. If we can help people recognize their biases, maybe we can create educational environments where every child's potential is recognized and nurtured, regardless of what their teachers or caregivers look like." Emma, who had been quietly absorbing this adult conversation, suddenly spoke up. "Miss Amelia, are you going to write about how smart kids can be even when grown-ups don't expect them to be smart?" Amelia smiled. That's exactly what I'm going to write about, Emma. 3 months later, Dr. Amelia Thompson's research was published in the Journal of Educational Psychology under the title Hidden in Plain Sight: Unconscious Bias and Missed Opportunities in Privileged Learning Environments. The paper became one of the most cited works in educational research history. The study detailed how a Harvard professor had worked as a nanny for 6 months, observing how wealthy families' assumptions about intelligence and capability affected their children's educational development. More importantly, it documented how brilliant, qualified individuals could remain invisible in plain sight when their competence didn't match observers' expectations. Catherine Whitmore read the paper when it was published, recognizing her family in the anonymized case studies despite the changed names and disguised details. The experience of seeing her own biases laid out in academic language was devastating and transformative. She reached out to Amelia 6 months later. "I want to learn," Catherine said during their coffee meeting. "I want to understand how I became someone who could live with a genius for half a year and never see her. I don't want to pass that blindness on to my children." Amelia, who had returned to Harvard but continued her research on bias in educational settings, agreed to work with Catherine on developing what would become the Whitmore Foundation for Educational Equity, a program that provided scholarships and support for exceptional students from underrepresented communities. Emma Whitmore, now 10 years old and enrolled in advanced mathematics courses, remained in touch with her former nanny. She often told people about the time she learned calculus from the smartest person in the world who was disguised as a regular person. "The best teachers," Emma would say, with the wisdom of someone who had learned a profound lesson at a young age, "are the ones who help you see things you never knew were there. And sometimes the most important lessons are about seeing people you never knew were there, too." Dr. Amelia Thompson's work continued to influence educational policy and practice around the world. But she never forgot the 6 months she spent as an invisible expert in the Whitmore household, and the profound lesson it taught her about the power of assumptions to blind us to the extraordinary talents that surround us every day. "The most dangerous phrase in education," she would tell her students, is, "I know what you're capable of based on what I see." Because what we see is filtered through our expectations, our biases, and our assumptions about who deserves recognition. True education begins when we learn to see beyond those filters. The story of the Professor Nanny became legendary in academic circles, not just for its innovative methodology, but for what it revealed about how society's biases can cause us to overlook genius hiding in plain sight. It reminded educators, parents, and policymakers that brilliance comes in many forms and from many backgrounds, and that our ability to recognize and nurture that brilliance depends on our willingness to look beyond our preconceptions about who deserves respect and recognition. If this story touched your heart, remember that every person you encounter, from the person who serves your coffee to the person who cleans your office, has a story, talents, and knowledge that might surprise you. The next time you interact with someone in a service role, take a moment to really see them as a complete human being. Ask questions, listen to their answers, treat them with the respect every person deserves. You never know when you might be talking to someone whose expertise could change your understanding of the world, if only you're wise enough to recognize it when you see it. And remember, the most important lesson we can teach our children is not just to be smart, but to be wise enough to recognize intelligence and dignity in others, regardless of their circumstances or appearance. True education isn't just about acquiring knowledge. It's about developing the wisdom to see and value the knowledge that exists all around us in every person we meet. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.